Today, we're diving into a challenge that's literally reshaping cities right under our feet. We're talking about the borderless city, and we're going to ask, what happens when the lines on our maps just don't match reality anymore? Let's get into it.
I mean, think about that for a second. What happens when a city gets too big for its own map? This isn't just about traffic jams or feeling crowded. It's about a city physically spilling over its official lines, creating one massive connected area that the old map just doesn't recognize.
Well, when that happens, you get something called a metropolitan zone. And here's the kicker. Whether you realize it or not, there's a pretty good chance you're living in one right now. And it's creating a whole new kind of problem that our old-school city governments and their maps are really struggling with.
So, let's break this down. What exactly is going on when a city's growth just starts to ignore its own borders?
Okay, so a metropolitan zone is basically this. You have a main central city, right? And then you have all the surrounding towns and suburbs that are totally connected to it. People commute in for work, they use the city's services, they live their lives like it's all one huge place. Because, let's be real, functionally it is. The only catch, each one of those places has its own separate government.
Now, this isn't some brand new thing, but the speed at which it's happening is just staggering. Just look at Mexico. In 1900, it was a mostly rural country. By 1940, researchers pinpointed the first 5 of these metro areas. But by 2005, that number didn't just grow, it exploded to 56. We're talking about incredibly fast urban growth.
And to really see how this all plays out on the ground, we're going to zoom into one specific state that is a perfect case study for this whole challenge, the state of Hidalgo in central Mexico.
So here we are. Hidalgo was located just north of the absolute megacity that is Mexico City. And that proximity is key. It's made it the perfect spot for this metropolitan boom to really take off, as people and businesses started looking for a little more space just outside the capital.
Now, let's look at Hidalgo's capital, Pachuca. It officially became a metropolitan zone back in 1990. Fast forward just 15 years to 2005, and its population had rocketed up to almost 440,000 people. That is some serious explosive growth, and it puts a ton of pressure on everything from roads to water pipes.
And Pachuca wasn't an isolated case. By 2005, the number of these official zones in Hidalgo had jumped to 3. So you had Pachuca, but also the areas around Tulancingo and Tula, all going through the same rapid border-crossing expansion. This was happening all over the state.
But to really get to the heart of the matter, we have to zoom in even closer, right into the middle of that Pachuca zone. Because this isn't just a story about numbers, it's really a tale of 2 cities.
So, on one side, you've got Pachuca de Soto. That's the historic city, the traditional urban core. And then, right next door, you've got Mineral de la Reforma. It used to be its own smaller town, but starting in the 80s, it just started soaking up all the population spilling out from Pachuca and even Mexico City. It became a classic booming suburb.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Look how intertwined these two have become. Together, just these 2 places, Pachuca and Mineral de la Reforma, make up over 78% of the entire metropolitan population. They share roads, businesses, workers, you name it. For all intents and purposes, they operate as a single, unified city.
But they aren't. They are 2 completely separate governments, divided by one invisible administrative line on a map.
And that invisible line? That's where all the trouble begins. It creates what you might call the cooperation conundrum.
I know what you're thinking. So what's the big deal? They're neighbors. Why can't they just figure it out and work together? And that is the million-dollar question. Because when you share literally everything except a government, things get complicated fast.
Because you end up with these huge shared headaches that don't give a hoot about city limits. Think about it. Water and drainage. Who manages the system that serves everybody? Public security. A criminal can cross from one police department's turf to another in like 30 seconds. And what about trash? A garbage truck from one city might have to drive through the other to get to the landfill. So who's responsible and who pays for it all?
You know, the research behind this explainer puts it perfectly. It says that getting different cities to team up is a necessary condition for efficiency, but it is not enough to achieve it. In other words, just agreeing to cooperate is only the first step on a very, very long road.
Which brings us to the biggest question of them all. This problem in Hidalgo, it's a preview of the future for cities everywhere. How in the world do you govern the borderless city?
So let's ask it one more time.
How are you supposed to govern a city that has totally outgrown its own map? A place that lives and breathes as one single organism, but is legally chopped up into a bunch of different pieces.
Okay, so let's put it all together. What have we learned? 1. Cities are busting out of their old boundaries. 2. This creates these massive metropolitan zones that act as one city but are run by many different governments. 3. This setup leads to huge shared problems with things like water, safety, and trash. And finally, 4. Figuring out how to truly cooperate across those invisible lines? Well, that's the single biggest challenge facing the cities of our future.
So the next time you look at a map of your city, think about where it really ends. Because this shows us that the greatest challenges on the horizon might not be found inside the city limits at all, but in those complicated, undefined, and absolutely critical spaces that lie in between them.